Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. This show is going to be a double edition because there are two events, one UFC and one Strikeforce, taking place within a 3-day span. I'll talk about the UFC show later, but we're going to start with Strikeforce Feijao versus Henderson. This event will take place on March 5th, 2011, live from the Nationwide Arena in Columbus, Ohio. There will be 4 main card fights with 2 titles up for grabs. Injury replacement Liz Carmouche will challenge Marlos Kunin for the women's welterweight title in the co-main event. Carmouche was a late replacement for Miesha Tate, and that is one of the reasons I wait to the last week or so to do my picks, to make sure that the fights that I pick don't get changed. In the main event, Rafael Feijao, the light heavyweight champion, will put his title up on the line against a very dangerous challenger in Dan Henderson. I'll be giving my betting odds for all 8 fights that I do predictions for, and I hope to be able to parlay all 8 fights together with SportsInteraction.com, as I have had success in the past with larger shows going 7-0 and 9-0, so it might be worthwhile to make a bet with SportsInteraction.com. I have adjusted my rankings for the Strikeforce heavyweight division based on the last show, Antonio Silva and Sergey Kharitonov moving up, and Fedor and Brett Rogers dropping down. Feel free to make your comments, and on that note, let's get to the predictions. To start the Strikeforce card, lightweights Jorge Masvidal, 20-6, will bet 11-0 on Billy Evangelista, number 5 in the KO 155-pound rankings. Evangelista is riding a 2-fight winning streak following a no contest, while Masvidal is returning to Strikeforce after a catchweight defeat versus Paul Daly at Shark Fights 13. I would expect Evangelista will be the favorite on $1.45 and Masvidal at $2.30. These two lightweights are both looking to put themselves in the title hunt with a win in this contest. The first thing that stands out to me in this fight is the size advantage that Masvidal will have. He has gone up and down between 155 and 170 pounds. He will stand 2 inches taller, and most notably, he'll have a 7-inch reach advantage. Looking at their actual fighting techniques, these guys use a lot of the same things. So the big question is, who does it better? Both fighters like to work in the clinch. Each will use the tie plum with knees, and both will take the fight to the mat if they get the chance. Both Masvidal and Evangelista will use trips in close or shoot in from the outside, grab a single leg, and drive through to complete the takedown. I would have to say that from what I've seen, Masvidal is the better athlete, but Evangelista is the stronger of the two fighters. On the ground, neither fighter is overly gifted in the submission game. Billy has never submitted an opponent, while Masvidal has won to his credit. Both of these guys like to work the ground and pound, which has led to victories in the past, and they're pretty good at it, but with 16 career decisions combined, I see that they use their grappling game more to score points than to finish fights. Evangelista will work for a takedown, put his opponent on their back, and then control them. While he will throw down some shots, he seems more content to just hold them there and score on the judges' cards. Against George Gurgel, he did a pretty good job controlling the BJJ black belt on the mat and kept Gurgel from attempting any submissions. Jorge takes a similar approach, but from what I've seen, he seems a little more willing to advance his position, but he has been tapped out before on the mat. Moving to the striking, Evangelista will throw leg kicks, use a left jab, keeps his hands up, and covers up well. In his fight with Nam Pham, he was getting outboxed and got rocked, but his takedown saved him. More recently, his stand-up looked much crisper. He was offering some head kicks and throwing a few more combinations against George Gurgel. I think that Masvidal is the quicker of the two men, both on the feet and with his hands. He throws some nice combinations, leads with an overhand right, jabs with his left, and has 10 career knockouts. He snapped off some pretty good leg kicks and stopped Yves Edwards with a devastating head kick. In his most recent fight, he moved up to welterweight and held his own with Paul Daly and potentially could have got the win in that fight. Based on what I've seen, I would think that Masvidal will have an advantage on the feet with his reach advantage and quickness. That being said, I think that Evangelista has the tools to neutralize those advantages with his wrestling skills. Both of these guys are decision machines, but Evangelista has scored more unanimous decision wins in pretty much every fight he hasn't finished, while Masvidal has dropped 3 of his last 6. Evangelista knows how to pick up victories, and I would expect he will look to take Masvidal down and smother him. So my prediction is Billy Evangelista to defeat Jorge Masvidal by decision. Next, we move to the middleweight division. It's 24-8-1 Melvin Manhoef is squaring off with 12-3 Tim Kennedy, number 4 on the 185-pound KO rankings. Manhoef is returning after a devastating knockout defeat versus Robbie Lawler, and he's now dropped 2 in a row, while Kennedy had a 4-fight winning streak snapped with his title fight defeat against Jacare. No odds again for this fight, but I would think Kennedy will be the favorite at $1.20 and Manhoef the dog at $2.65. Now, styles make fights. You hear that phrase thrown around usually when a grappler and a striker meet in the cage, but I think that styles can just as easily ruin fights. See Silva versus Maia or Lasis. This fight has the potential to go either way. You have a pretty good grappler in Tim Kennedy taking on a K1 level striker in Melvin Manhoef. Let's talk about the lesser side of these two fighters. First, Kennedy's striking is improving, but it's not great, and against Manhoef, it will be more of a liability than an asset. Miller's not an overly technical striker. He will throw an overhand right sometimes on its own, but he also will use it in combination with a left jab and leg kicks. Mostly he will use his striking to set up his takedowns by punching and then dropping down for a double leg, or he'll wait for his opponent to push forward with their striking attack and then duck under looking to go to the mat. My biggest concern with Kennedy's stand-up is his stance. Against Jacare, Kennedy was standing straight up and down and wasn't tucking his chin, and against a talented heavy-handed striker like Manhoef, that could be a huge mistake. Now for Melvin, a huge mistake would be letting this fight go to the mat, where his ground game is a work in progress. If he gets on top, he has the power to end a fight, but he also is vulnerable to being reversed or submitted. In his MMA career, he has been tapped out 5 times, with those 5 times coming in his last 6 defeats, so the word is getting out that his Achilles heel is the mat game. The odd thing is Manhoef seems willing to take a fighter down, as he showed in his fight against Akiyama, where he attempted to take down but got reversed before they even hit the mat and then got armbarred. Without getting into it too much detail, it's safe to say that Kennedy's going to want to take this fight to the mat, and Melvin will want to keep it standing. Looking at Kennedy's mat game, he has 6 career submissions and has used his ground and pound to pick up several wins. Trevor Prangley has pretty good takedown defense, and Kennedy took him down and was able to submit him inside the first round. Against Nick Thompson, a very experienced grappler, Kennedy controlled him, leading to a ground and pound stoppage, and against Jacare, Kennedy held his own against the BJJ ace. When the fight hits the ground, Tim has good control over a downed opponent, constantly works to improve his positioning, and if he doesn't get a sub, he will work to full mount, raining down blows, which is equally as effective. As I said, Manhoef is a K1 level striker. He has 23 career TKOs or KO wins, while having only been stopped 3 times, including his last appearance in Strikeforce. In that contest, Manhoef was lighting up Lawler until he got caught with a knockout punch, and that was that. Up until that point, Manhoef was fighting a very calculated fight as he was combining his lethal striking repertoire with a patient approach to his attack. In previous fights, Manhoef would simply bull rush in looking to knock his opponent out with a flurry of punches and kicks, but in the Lawler fight he was attacking and moving away, which was working until the fight suddenly ended. Melvin has vicious leg kicks that can really do a lot of damage, again, something he showcased in the Lawler fight. Manhoef likes to stalk his opponent, doesn't use a lot of lateral movement, and has incredibly fast hands. He throws a right followed by a left hook and can do this in repetition until his adversary crumples to the ground. Like I said already, in the Lawler fight, Melvin chose to engage and back away. He was very effective when he attacked, and for the most part didn't leave a lot of room to be countered. Unfortunately, Lawler found just enough of an opening. So this fight will come down to whether or not Manhoef can keep the fight standing. If he can, he'll let Kennedy up and probably stop him. If he can't, I would expect that Tim will be able to submit him. Kennedy is going to be the taller fighter, so he should have some leverage. And seeing as that Manhoef has been submitted in 3 of his last 6 fights, I would think that his takedown defense is not invincible. Look for Kennedy to shoot in as quickly as possible and put Melvin on his back, or wait for Manhoef to engage, duck under his strikes, and score the takedown. While doing this, he'll need to watch out for Manhoef's flurries because all it takes is 1 strike to end a fight. I think that Kennedy's chance of scoring a takedown is more likely than Melvin scoring the knockout blow. So my prediction is Tim Kennedy defeat Melvin Manhoef by submission. In the co-main event of the evening, the Strikeforce Women's Welterweight Champion, 18-4 Marlos Romina Kunin will put her title on the line against 6-0 Liz Guerrilla Carmouche. The champ is defending her belt for the first time since capturing it, while the challenger is undefeated with 2 wins while fighting for Strikeforce. There are no odds for this fight, but I would think that Kunin will be the favorite at $1.25 and Carmouche the dog at $2.60. This fight has materialized as a result of Miesha Tate suffering an injury and Carmouche being thrust into the limelight. Carmouche was victorious in her alternate bout for the 4-woman tournament that Tate won, which gave her this title shot. First and foremost, Kunin will have a big-time experience edge with 22 fights to Carmouche's 6. Secondly, I think this is a big step up in talent for Carmouche, as other than Jan Finney, Carmouche has never fought an opponent with more than 3 bouts. Carmouche's mode of operation is her takedowns. Guerrilla is strong, she will close the distance and push her opponent into the cage and smother them. When she gets in control, she'll either deliver strikes in tight or take the fight to the mat. Against Finney, she took her down, controlled her, and eventually pounded her out. But there were times in that fight that Finney was able to get the upper hand on the mat. She has shown some improved stand-up skills, but is still for the most part raw. She will work some leg kicks, picking away at her opponent, and will throw a right hand in combination with a left kick. The champion Koenen is a Dutch Muay Thai striker with 3 career knockouts. She has vicious body kicks, will use a push kick to keep her opponent on the outside. She has a good right, but could really benefit a lot if she were to throw it in combination with a left hook. If she gets in tight, she can do a lot of damage with her knees and will throw an elbow strike that can also be quite damaging. Koenen will certainly have the edge in the stand-up, but it is her submission skills that are really her best asset. She won the title via submission and has 13 wins by tap-out with no defeats. 7 of her 13 submissions have come as a result of an armbar, including her win in the title fight. She is good in the top position and just as comfortable with someone in her guard. She has shown some nasty up kicks, which can give a fighter like Carmouche issues if she's able to find herself in that position. With the Tate Koenen fight, I was really going back and forth on who I thought would win it. I think that Carmouche is a similar fighter to Tate with not quite as refined skills. I already mentioned that this fight is going to be a big step up for Carmouche, and if you throw in the fact that she will have just over a week to prepare for this fight, that's a lot to overcome. That being said, fighters have overcome greater obstacles when opportunity knocks, and this is a huge opportunity. Carmouche's best chance for victory will be to push Koenen against the wall, beat her up inside, and then take the fight to the mat for some ground and pound. That's going to be much easier said than done. Koenen's superior striking will make it very difficult for Liz to close the distance, and if the fight goes to the clinch, the Dutch striker will be much taller, giving her leverage advantage, and is more than capable in that position herself. Finally, if the ladies find themselves on the mat, Koenen's grappling skills will give Carmouche fits, and the threat of submission will be constant. Basically, where Carmouche has the best chance for winning this bout, there's a far greater possibility of her losing it there. So my prediction is Marlos Koenen to defeat Liz Carmouche by submission. In the main event of the evening, 26-8, Dan Henderson, the #1 ranked KO light heavyweight for Strikeforce, will battle the Strikeforce 205-pound champ Rafael Feijao. The champ has won 3 in a row, all by stoppage, while Henderson rebounded from his promotional debut defeat to pick up a first-round victory over Babalusa Brawl. Sports Interaction has no odds yet for this fight, but another site has Henderson as the fave at $1.45 and Feijao at $2.80. Let's look first at the challenger. Dan has held both the Pride middleweight and welterweight belts, and he has completed in title fights against the likes of Vanderlei Silva, Rampage Jackson, Anderson Silva, and Jake Shields. Tossed in a number of tournament appearances, and Hendu has a wealth of big fight experience to draw upon. The champ Feijao doesn't have nearly as much experience, with only 12 career fights, 1 previous title fight, and a lack of big-name opponents on his resume. This is definitely a step up for the Brazilian. What Feijao does have over the veteran is that at the age of 30, he really is coming into his prime, while Dan, 10 years older, is in the later stages of his career. Before talking about the fighting techniques, etc., it's important to note that fighter fatigue can play a huge role in this contest. Henderson has had endurance issues throughout his career. Looking at his fights with Rich Franklin, he did just enough early on to get the edge in the scorecards and then tired late. Also against both Rampage and Jake Shields, Dan started off very well, winning the opening round in both fights, but then tired and lost decisions. Further decisions accounted for 5 of Dan's 8 career defeats, so it seems that pushing Hendu into the later stages is the key to defeating him. Now, Kamikaze has also dropped a fight due to failed endurance, as he got knocked out by Mike Powell near the end of the second round of their bout. A questionable endurance level has only cost him once in his career, but having rewatched some of his past bouts, he does become slower as the fight pushes into the second half, and he's only gone beyond the second round twice and has never gone to decision. Alright, I will return to this in a bit, but let's break down their skill sets. Rafael has 9 career stoppages, including 5 in the first round. He uses a relaxed and straight up and down stance, not a ton of movement, but he certainly isn't stationary. The Brazilian possesses a very heavy overhand right, jabs with his left, and throws strong kicks to the legs and body. He also likes to get in close and fight along the fence, and I really like his use of the Thai plum with knee strikes to the head. He trains with Anderson Silva at Black House, and I can really see similarities in their techniques. Now, Dan has an equally dangerous overhand right, and his striking stance is focused on delivering it. He keeps his left hand out in front, chin tucked, and his right hand pulled back while plodding forward, looking to explode. He's never been knocked out, and he seems more than willing to take a shot to make one, as he will stand toe-to-toe in wild exchanges. Along with his punches, Henderson will also throw kicks, but he really likes to get in tight, especially along the cage. He is very strong and likes to grab double underhooks, pin his opponent against the wall, and slam his knees into their legs, like he did in the Rampage fight. Dan also uses his wrestling background by taking the fight to the mat. He has very good top control and can do a lot of damage when he throws punches to the downed opponent, as we saw in his last fight. His takedown defense is solid as well, and if an opponent gets on top, Dan is very skilled at working to a more advantageous position or even getting up. His opponent is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He only has one submission win, but I think that's mainly because Feijao is such a devastating striker. He will use his throws and trips from the clinch to take his adversary down, and he will drive forward with strikes and then drop down for a takedown. He has heavy ground and pound, and if he gets an opponent in trouble on the mat, he has devastating piston-like strikes that can end a fight very quickly. I think the most impressive part of his grappling game is his takedown defense. He's very difficult to put on the mat and even harder to keep down. Against King Mo, a well-accomplished wrestler, Feijao defended early takedown attempts, and even when Mo picked him up and slammed him, the Brazilian sprung right back up to his feet. Previous to this, Mo was able to take his opponents down with little trouble, but Feijao's technique and overall strength was the difference in that match. Going through the challenger's previous matches against strikers like Rampage, Anderson Silva, and Rich Franklin, Henderson worked to get the fight to the mat, and against grapplers like Husamir Paul Harris, Jake Shields, and Babalu, Dan seemed to focus more on keeping the fight standing. Feijao is good in both areas, but I would think that Dan would be more inclined to take the fight to the ground. The big questions are, can he keep it there? Secondly, Dan is 0-2 in 5-round fights, which tells me his best chance of winning this one is to stop it early. But the champ has only been stopped once, and that was because he got tired. Since that fight, he has 3 wins, including one fight that went into the later stages of the second round, and against Mo, he actually seemed to get stronger as the fight moved into the third stanza. So I think his conditioning is improving. While over Henderson's last 7 bouts, he tired and got submitted by Silva, tired and got decision by both Rampage and Shields, faded in the later stages against Franklin, had 2 first-round stoppages, and against Paul Harris, tired a little, but that fight wasn't as physically demanding. From this, I gather the champ will have an endurance advantage, along with an edge in the speed department, and should be a better technical striker. If Feijao's takedown defense is up to the challenge, Dan could be in trouble. Feijao will be on the defensive early, needing to avoid Henderson's big right, but as Dan fades, he should be able to pick him apart with his striking, use that Thai plum to do some serious damage, and maybe even take him down. So my prediction is Rafael Feijao to retain his light heavyweight title and defeat Dan Henderson by decision. Moving to the second half of this double edition episode, I'll give my predictions for UFC Live Sanchez vs. Kampmann. This event will take place on March 3rd, 2011, a free event live from the KFC Yum Center in Louisville, Kentucky. There will be 4 main card fights, and in the main event, Martin Kampmann will look to continue his push up the welterweight ranks, while Diego Sanchez will try to build on the momentum created in his last victory. In the co-main event, 2 top-level wrestlers in Mark Munoz and CB Dollaway will square off, both looking to crack the top 10 of the middleweight ranks. I would like to take a moment to send a shout out to another site that is now hosting my prediction shows. MMAgeeks.co.cc is a great source for fight footage that I use when I make my predictions, and I highly recommend checking them out. As of this video, UFC 27 has not taken place yet, so I haven't updated my rankings or record, but I will have by the end of this weekend. Please subscribe to my channel, and now let's get to the UFC Live Sanchez vs. Kampmann picks. We kick off our UFC Live card in the bantamweight division as the former champ 8-1 Brian Bowles, number 2 on the KO rankings, will rematch 12-5 Damasio Angel of Death Page, ranked 8. Bowles is returning almost exactly 1 year after he dropped the WEC 135-pound strap, while Page is coming off defeat, which came after back-to-back first-round victories. In their first fight, Bowles submitted Page in the opening round, so I would think he'll be the favorite at $1.35 and Page the dog at $2.50. Recapping their first meeting, Page came out very aggressive, slipped, and Bowles got on top. Eventually, Page did reverse him on the mat, but the fighters returned to their feet. Page looked for another takedown, stuck his head in too far. Bowles locked in the guillotine. Now Page attempted to slam to shake free, but ended up crumpling to the floor and tapping out at the 3-minute and 30-second mark. Before getting into the fight, I wanted to make a note that Bowles has been off for almost a year, which could play a factor in this fight. But when I look at their first bout, I noticed that Bowles had sat idle for almost 8 months, so the layoff might not play as big a role as I originally expected. Okay, looking at Damasio Page, he is a fast striker. He likes to come forward very aggressively with both kicks and punches, and will either attack a fighter standing or take him to the ground. There are both positives and negative aspects to this style. He holds 10 career first-round victories with 6 stoppages and 4 submissions, including 5 fights ending inside the first minute and a half. On the other side of this, his all-or-nothing style attack is he is vulnerable, as he's been submitted 3 times in the opening round. Further, if he's unable to shut his opponent down early, he runs the risk of slowing down and either being decisioned or submitted, which happened against Demetrius Johnson. Page started that fight off like a firecracker. Johnson survived, and then as the bout continued on, Page slowed, Johnson started to control the pace, and eventually submitted him. Breaking down his attacks, like I said, he really will use everything and anything to attack his opponent. He has dynamite in his right hand, as he showed against Marcus Galvo. He connected with the right, and when Galvo was stunned, Page started unloading on him with continuous right hands until his opponent hit the canvas. He has nice takedowns, likes to use throws, and when he gets the fight to the mat, has good control for the most part and really can do a lot of damage or work for submissions, which he has 5 of. One thing I've noticed is that when the fight hits the mat, he does seem to get trapped in submissions. Along with 4 of his 5 career defeats being tap-outs, I've seen a number of times where he has been close to being submitted. His opponent, Brian Bowles, is almost the polar opposite. He's as plain a looking fighter as you can get. He's patient, and he adheres to the quality over quantity when he takes approach to striking. He has power in his hands with 3 stoppages, potentially the most impressive being against Miguel Torres, who actually had Bowles in trouble, but when he began to attack, Bowles caught him with a counter strike and knocked him out. He has a nice straight right hand and showed impressive timing when he was able to connect with the very quick Dominic Cruz in their fight. He is a patient striker, but when he opens up, he is very effective and incredibly accurate. Bowles has a pretty solid ground game as well. He has tapped out 5 opponents and threatens with subs when he gets the chance. I think this fight will come down to the first few minutes. Look for Page to rush in and try to overwhelm Bowles and either unload with strikes, especially with his right. I would think he will avoid taking the fight to the mat based on what happened in their last fight, but the former champ will need to wait out the initial storm, either counter-striking, utilizing his 4.5-inch reach advantage, or shooting in for the takedown. If Damasio can't put him away early, Bowles should get the better of him in this fight. It will probably go longer than the first fight, but that should work in Bowles' favor. So my prediction is Brian Bowles to defeat Damasio Page by submission. Moving to the first of 2 middleweight bouts, UFC veteran 19-7 Alessio Legionario Sakara will face injury replacement and UFC newcomer 4-0 Chris Weidman. Undefeated Weidman has finished 3 of his first 4 fights in the first round, fighting under the Ring of Combat banner, while Sakara is riding a 3-fight win streak and hasn't fought since March 2010 after missing his last bout because of illness. Betting-wise, I would think Sakara will be the favorite at roughly $1.25 and Weidman around $2.70. Let's start with Sakara. He's got a boxing background, crisp striking and solid combinations, and 9 stoppages in his MMA career. He has good footwork and body movement, keeps his hands up well, and really likes to throw the head kicks, as he showed when he knocked out Joe Vitapo. On the negative side of things, he has had issues in the past with power strikers like Drew McFedry, Houston Alexander, and Chris Lieben. When they start putting pressure on Sakara, he seems to back off, and when they start landing with power, Sakara tends to find himself in big trouble. UFC newcomer Weidman is an aggressive striker. He's got a nice right hook, power in his left, and will use some leg kicks. Weidman isn't afraid to brawl and will put pressure on an opponent against the cage. But when it really comes down to it, Weidman's key to victory is his grappling skills. He is a 2-time NCAA All-American wrestler and competed at the 2009 ADCC Submission Wrestling Championships. In his MMA debut, he used his wrestling skills to control his opponent and then finish the fight with a well-executed Kimura. Weidman has great takedown defense, but it's his takedowns that are even more impressive. He has an explosive shot, works very hard to complete his takedowns, and when he takes guys down, he effortlessly passes into side control. From side control, he can either work for submissions or uses heavy ground and pound. Another technique that Weidman uses is a front headlock. He is quite strong and will break his opponent down, which can lead to a dominant position on the mat. So the key to this fight is what Sakara can do on the mat, or better yet, do to keep himself off the ground. Sakara is a BJJ brown belt with 2 career submission victories along with 2 submission defeats. Looking back at some of Alessio's fights against grapplers, he showed fairly good takedown defense, and when he did get taken down, he was able to get back up. The only fight in which he was really put on the mat and kept there was against Palace Latis. The BJJ black belt took Sakara down on several occasions, but where he had the most success was later in the fight when Alessio started to get tired. Sakara is going to have a huge experience advantage in this fight with 23 fights to Weidman's 4. He will also be the more technically sound striker. Weidman will be the better grappler and I would think should have a superior endurance. There is always the issue of how a wrestler will respond when he's getting punched in the face, like we saw with Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley, which could be an issue in this fight. Further, Alessio will have been away from the cage for almost a year, so ring rust also could be a factor. And on top of all this, Weidman is the 4th in a revolving series of opponents for Alessio. First Rivera, then Falco, then Natal, and now Weidman Where the first two were strikers and Italo BJJ black belt, Weidman's wrestling is probably not something that Sakara was preparing for. I was looking forward to the Sakara-Rivera fight at UFC 122. I was really looking forward to Sakara-Falco. I didn't have time to consider a matchup with Natal, and now we have this fight. Barring another change, and with the left field luck, I wouldn't rule anything out. This is a huge opportunity for Weidman in this fight, as he will be on the main card against a veteran. I can't see him not taking this fight to where he is strongest. Latest was able to take Sakara down, and I think that Weidman is a superior athlete and will use his wrestling base to put Alessio down and keep him there. I'm going to take a risk on the kid and hope it pays off big, so my prediction is Chris Weidman to upset Alessio Sakara and defeat him by stoppage. In the co-main event of the evening, 12-3 CB, the Doberman Dalloway will battle Mark the Filipino Wrecking Machine Munoz 9-2. Dalloway has torn off 3 straight wins and is 5-2 overall in the UFC, while Munoz has won 4 of his last 5, including defeating Dalloway's teammate Aaron Simpson. On the books, Dalloway will be the dog at $2.62, and Munoz the favorite at $1.44. This matchup brings together 2 talented collegiate wrestlers who have both had success making the transition to MMA. Quickly comparing their wrestling backgrounds, Dalloway was an All-American in 2006, competing at Arizona State, finishing 5th in the 184-pound division. Mark Munoz was an All-American in back-to-back years, won 2 Big 12 wrestling titles, and captured the NCAA title in 2001 in the 197-pound weight class at Oklahoma State. Comparing the wrestling pedigrees, I would give the edge to Munoz based on his accomplishments, but as I said in the past, this is more than just a wrestling match. The first thing I look at is the physical comparison. Munoz was for the most part stymied by Yushin Okami, and I attribute some of Okami's success to his size advantage. The reason I bring this up is because Dalloway is the same height as Okami, 6'2", and will have an even greater reach advantage of 5 inches over Munoz than Okami did. But in spite of these similarities between Munoz's past and current opponents, this is not enough of a reason to simply pick Dalloway, a mistake I've made in previous predictions. Enough with the what-ifs and yeah buts. Let's talk striking. Starting with Munoz, Mark's stand-up has been improving leaps and bounds every time we see him in the octagon. Against Yushin, he was outclassed on the feet, but at moments he had success. And against Aaron Simpson, his striking helped him to get the win in that fight. Munoz hits very hard, especially with his overhand left, and he tends to wing power punches that aren't the most technical, but can be quite effective. He has started to incorporate some combos into his arsenal, punch, kick, and sometimes he will throw together a couple of punches followed by a shot. When he gets in tight, he will use knees and uppercuts that are deceptively powerful. He doesn't have the longest of reach for a middleweight, but this can be a benefit when he gets in tight. Also, for a fighter that is relatively new to the striking game, he's pretty light on his feet and has good movement and avoids taking too much damage. I haven't seen as much of Dalloway's stand-up as I would like to, for 2 reasons. I've had trouble finding videos of his striking, and more importantly, CB prefers to take his fights to the ground. From what I've seen, he has some decent leg kicks, likes to jab with his left while holding his right back, and he will use his knees in the clinch. But like I said, his main goal seems to be he wants to get the fight to the mat. If you look at his history, it's hard to dispute this. Against Sadala, he had 1 takedown, he got submitted. Against Taylor, 1 takedown and tap out. Against Vicenzio, 1 takedown and a stoppage victory. Against Lawler, he got sub when he shot in. He has combined 11 takedowns against Relic Silva and Dorkson. He tapped him out on the mat. UFC.com is a breakdown of 51% takedown, 34% submission, and 15% striking, comparing with 31% for Munoz in the takedown department. Which is a much more even spread for Munoz. When CB goes to the mat, he's quite effective at finishing fights. He holds impressive submission wins, and he's also stopped guys with his ground and pound. He has very good top control and can really break a fighter's will with relentless attack, working towards a better position while looking for the win. He has been submitted in the past where he got a little careless in his ground attack and got caught. Munoz has an impressive mat game, and with the exception of the Okami fight, has been able to take down and beat up pretty much anyone he wanted to. He pounded out Ryan Jensen and Kendall Grove and did a number on Aaron Simpson with his ground and pound. He is very heavy-handed, and opponents can be overwhelmed with his strength, especially if he starts to unload. He can bring about a ref stoppage quickly. He has an excellent shot and will use trips as well from the clinch. But against Okami, he committed himself too much to his takedowns and spent a lot of his energy in this fashion. This is the first time that Dalloway will be fighting a man who has equal or better grappling skills, which means CB won't be the dominant fighter on the mat, which is his comfort zone. So he will have to rely on his striking, which I think he'll be the second best in the cage in that department. Munoz has already beaten a top-level collegiate wrestler in Aaron Simpson, and even though I think Dalloway will fare better than Simpson did, I still think that Munoz gets his hand raised at the end of this fight, so my prediction is Mark Munoz to defeat CB Dalloway by decision. In the main event, Diego Sanchez will look to break into the upper rankings of the UFC welterweight division as he battles 17-4 Martin the Hitman Kampmann, number 7 on the KO 170-pound rankings. Kampmann is coming off a close defeat versus Jake Shields at UFC 121. Prior to that, he had won 2 in a row. Sanchez is returning from a win over Paul Thiago, also at UFC 121, which snapped a 2-fight losing streak. Kampmann will be the favorite at $1.57, Diego the dog at $2.25. Now, both fighters have effective but fairly different approaches to striking. Each has recorded 7 stoppages in their career, and on the opposite side of things, Diego has been shut down once, which was the result of a cut versus BJ Penn, while Kampmann has suffered 3 stoppages, most notably against Nate Marquardt while fighting at middleweight, and he got knocked out on his feet by Paul Daly. Comparing their striking, Kampmann likes to use a very technical and patient approach, where Sanchez is an aggressive striker that has no problem brawling it out, note the Clay Guida fight. Technique-wise, Kampmann likes to use a straight right both to attack and to counter. Against Paul Thiago, he had great success by letting Paulo swing and then connecting with his right. The Dane also utilized the jab quite effectively, which can serve to keep an opponent at a distance they're not comfortable with. He has nice combinations, doubling up the left jab, followed by the right. He will mix in his leg kicks and likes to move in and out, engaging and retreating. That is something both fighters have in common. Diego will push forward and back, then back away, which is a technique that Greg Jackson likes to encourage in his fighters, as we've seen with GSP, Rashad Evans, and Melvin Gillard. Diego likes to push the pace with his fights and will use this to overwhelm his opponents when he starts connecting with strikes. He keeps his hands tight to his face, picking away with single shots, especially the straight left, also using inside and outside leg kicks, and then all at once he'll charge forward with a series of short, powerful strikes. He will throw a lot of 1-2s and really likes to use combinations to set up his shot. If he can't score the immediate takedown, he will work along the cage with knees and strikes in close, trying to wear his opponent down. On the mat, Diego has 8 submission wins, 0 defeats. He's a BJJ brown belt and has some pretty strong ground and pound. Against Thiago, he showed impressive scrambling skills, winding up in a dominant position more than a few times. But against John Hathaway, Diego had some issues getting the fight to the mat. Hathaway's ability to defend against the takedown really took a lot over Sanchez, and I feel that because Diego knew he didn't have the grappling game to fall back on, his overall performance was effective in a negative fashion. Martin Kampmann's ground game has been called underrated so many times by Joe Rogan that I think people must be getting get the message by now. He has 6 submission wins, most notably over Jacob Boatman and Jorge Rivera, and has never been tapped out. In his fight with Paul Thiago, he really controlled the black belt on the mat and threatened various submission attempts, especially the chokes. Kampmann's fight with Jake Shields showed that he can deal with the elite level grapplers of the world. Even though he did have some issues, he defended against submissions, offered some of his own, and was able to get out from under Shields at different points in that fight. His takedown defense is very good. He's hard to get a hold of to start with. He has good balance and a very good sprawl, all of which gave him a huge advantage over Paulo Thiago. The Brazilian would try to get the fight to the mat. Martin would defend, get top position, where he demonstrated excellent control. Now, Diego has a good shot, will set it up with strikes, and works hard for his takedowns. He has a wrestling background which helps him both offensively and defensively. He has a good guard, overwhelming ground and pound, and scrambles well, which he demonstrated in that fight with Diego. The fight with Paul Daly taught Martin Kampmann the importance of not allowing a fighter to get you away from your game plan. I think Diego learned a similar lesson in his defeats against Penn and Hathaway, as we really saw a return to the Diego of old in his last fight. It's kind of rare to have 2 fighters with a common opponent who they've both fought in the not-so-distant past. Having rewatched each fighter's battle with Paul Thiago, I think that Kampmann had a far easier time of it than Diego did. Sanchez was in a much tighter fight for the majority of it, where Kampmann simply outclassed the Brazilian from bell to bell, both on the feet and the mat. I think that Martin's technical striking will give him the edge on the feet, countering and avoiding Diego's aggressive charges. When Sanchez shoots in, I expect that Kampmann will be able to defend against the takedowns, resulting in the Dane being in the dominant position throughout much of the fight like he did against Thiago. I think that Kampmann is a real dark horse at 170 pounds, so my prediction is Martin Kampmann to defeat Diego Sanchez by decision. Kamikaze Corner now. I want to talk about 2 topics, and the first topic is Strikeforce and their depth or lack thereof. The first thing I look at is they're starting to put some good fights together, but I think they're being impacted by the fact they don't have a huge roster to call upon. And there's a number of guys out there that are fighting in smaller organizations or waiting to get a call that could really help them. First guy comes to mind is Dennis Kang in the middleweight division. They could really use another challenger, a fresh face to put in the fight up their cage with Jacare. I think Kang would be great. Patrick Cote, like match with Robbie Lawler, would be entertaining. I look at guys like Jamie Varner, Chris Hordeski, Paul Kelly in the lightweight division recently released. And I look at Brandon Vera in the light heavyweight division. He would have been great for Strikeforce, but he's been called back to the UFC because Thiago Silva tested positive for a banned substance. Maybe that's good, maybe it's not. The UFC light heavyweight division is full of sharks right now, and I was kind of hoping Vera might go to Strikeforce, get in some bigger fights there, maybe get himself a number one contender spot, get himself a title fight, maybe win the light heavyweight championship there. It would really benefit his career. He's a young guy, come back to the UFC and back on a roll and build up some momentum, some confidence. But he's going back to the UFC. Hopefully he can have some success, and we'll see him in some brighter lights because he's got a lot of talent going on. And those are my two topics for Kamikaze Overdrive's Kamikaze Corner. So those are my predictions for both events. I hope you enjoyed this show. I know it was longer than most, but it's just easier for me to do one big show than when there are two events this close together. And as always, the odds and payouts are posted on the sportsinteraction.com betting card. I've already mentioned this, but it would be worth your while to consider a bet on all 8 fights together, as I've had 2 larger events that I've done and gone 7-0 and 9-0 respectively. So going 8-0 on this show, not out of the question. Again, please check out MMA Geeks. Thank you for watching Kamikaze Overdrive, and I'll see you back here for UFC 128.